The ground grew rougher as Captain David Chin pushed deeper into the shattered outskirts of Kepler's edge. What had once been open transit lanes were now jagged scars of broken rock, twisted metal, and half-buried machines. Each step jarred his legs and sent fresh pain up his spine, but he kept moving. He had learned long ago that pain was just information. It told you what your body was doing. It did not decide what you would do. Thyrakai's breathing hitched against his chest. Her weight was a constant, crushing reminder that this was not a symbolic stand or a moral gesture. This was real. Every meter forward mattered. Behind them, far enough to give space but close enough to never truly disappear, the Valkyrian warriors followed. They did not help. They did not interfere. They watched. Their presence weighed on David almost as much as the alien warrior in his arms. Not because they threatened him, but because of what they represented. An entire culture had looked at one of its greatest fighters and decided she was already gone. David refused to accept that. A sharp tone sounded in his helmet as his sensors picked up movement ahead. He slowed, lowering his center of gravity and shifting Thyrakai so her injured side was better supported. Broken terrain opened into a wide basin filled with the wreckage of old mining rigs. It was the kind of place enemies like to use for ambushes. "Kim," David said quietly into his comm, "I've got thermal distortion ahead. Could be debris cooling unevenly, could be next scouts." There was a pause, then her voice returned, tight and controlled. "Confirmed. 2 light patrols moving toward your vector. They don't know you're carrying a casualty. Let's keep it that way." David scanned the wreckage, then altered his route without stopping. He angled toward a collapsed conveyor tower, using its shadow and metallic clutter to break his outline. The next relied heavily on automated targeting systems. Confuse the sensors, and you confuse the soldiers. Thyrakai stirred again. This time she did not fade immediately. Her eyes opened, sharper now, tracking movement even as pain etched itself across her face. "You are still carrying me," she said, disbelief threaded through every word. "Yes," David answered. "And before you argue, save your strength." Her jaw tightened. "My people will not intervene. You know this." "I noticed. They believe you are committing a grave mistake." David adjusted his grip and kept walking. Funny thing about mistakes. Sometimes they look a lot like courage when you're standing in the middle of them. She let out a weak, breathless sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been pain. "You are stubborn beyond reason, human. Occupational hazard." The next patrol moved closer. David slowed his breathing, letting his armor's internal systems sync with his heartbeat. He waited until the first enemy silhouette appeared between 2 rusted drilling platforms. Then he acted. Without breaking stride, David triggered a compact decoy flare and tossed it sideways into the wreckage. The flare emitted a burst of false thermal and electromagnetic noise, mimicking a group of running soldiers. The next reacted instantly, diverting their attention and fire toward the phantom threat. David used the opening to cross the basin at a steady, relentless pace. He did not run. Running drew attention. Instead, he moved like someone who belonged there, like someone who had already accepted the danger and refused to let it change him. Plasma fire lit the far side of the basin as the next chased ghosts. By the time they realized their mistake, David and Thyrakai were gone. Minutes stretched into hours. The terrain climbed, then dipped, then climbed again. David's muscles burned, his armor systems flashing repeated warnings he ignored. He rationed his energy carefully, stopping only long enough to reapply medical patches and keep Thyrakai's vital signs stable. The Valkyrians still followed. At one point, Commander Vexter Terra moved closer, her footsteps deliberately loud. "Human," she called out. "You are weakening. This path ends in your failure." David did not stop. "Then it'll be my failure," he said. "Not hers." Vexter studied him in silence. "If she survives, she will be marked." "By who?" "By her own people." David finally turned his head. "Then maybe that's the mark that needs changing." Vexter's expression flickered. For the briefest moment, something old and uncertain crossed her features. Then she stepped back, resuming her distant watch. Thyrakai spoke once they were alone again. You challenge more than tradition, she said quietly. You challenge fear. Good, David replied. Fears had a long enough turn at the controls. She closed her eyes, then opened them again with effort. If I live, I will have no place. David shifted her weight slightly to ease the strain on her injuries. If you live, you'll have choices. Cultures can survive being questioned. People don't always survive being abandoned. Her breathing steadied. The pain was still there, but something else was growing alongside it. Confusion, doubt, and beneath that, a fragile, dangerous thing. Hope. As the extraction point finally came into view, a narrow plateau carved into the mountainside, David felt his legs threaten to buckle. He locked his knees, forced another step, then another. Automated defense turrets hummed to life as they recognized his transponder code. Friendly systems. Safe systems. He crossed the boundary and lowered Thyrakai gently onto a medical stretcher as human medics rushed forward. They hesitated only a second at the sight of the alien warrior, then moved with practiced efficiency. Behind them, the Valkyrian observers stopped at the edge of the zone. They did not cross. As Thyrakai was lifted away, her hand closed weakly around David's wrist. Human, she whispered. You stayed. Yes, he said softly. And I would do it again. Her grip tightened for a heartbeat, then loosened as consciousness finally claimed her. David watched her go, exhaustion crashing over him like a wave. Around him, the battlefield seemed quieter now, as if something fundamental had shifted. Behind him, Commander Vexter Terra remained still, her gaze fixed on the path her fallen warrior had taken. For the first time in centuries, a Valkyrian had been carried from the field. And the galaxy would not forget who had done it. The medical bay aboard the orbital station was filled with a constant, controlled chaos. Soft lights illuminated rows of recovery pods, and the air carried the clean scent of antiseptics and recycled oxygen. David lay back on a narrow bench near the entrance, his armor finally removed, his body trembling as delayed exhaustion caught up with him. Across the bay, behind a transparent medical field, Thyrakai lay suspended in a stabilization frame. Tubes and glowing diagnostic lines traced along her armor and skin, mapping damage, repairing tissue, knitting bone. Human and alien medical teams worked side by side in tense silence. She should have been dead, one of the human doctors murmured. By all medical standards. David did not look away. She wasn't. Hours passed. Then more. The station rotated slowly, stars drifting past the wide viewport like silent witnesses. When Thyrakai finally opened her eyes again, she did not see a battlefield. She saw light, order, and faces that did not look away from her wounds. She tried to sit up. Pain flared, sharp and immediate, and she hissed softly before the medical field restrained her movement. Easy, a human medic said gently. You're safe. Safe. The word felt foreign. David stepped closer, standing just outside the field. Told you I'd get you somewhere better than a crater. Her eyes found him instantly. Focused. Searching. You carried me all the way, she said. Yes. That was not your duty. No, David agreed. It was my choice. Silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable. Heavy. Finally, Thyrakai spoke again, her voice lower. My people will not forgive this. David shrugged slightly. They don't have to. You do. Something shifted behind her eyes then. Not gratitude alone. Something deeper. Something that hurt. You risked your life for a warrior who could offer you nothing, she said. No alliance. No honor exchange. No debt enforced by law. David met her gaze without flinching. That's the point. News spread faster than anyone expected. Across the station, whispers turned into discussions. Discussions into debates. Human channels replayed sensor footage of a single soldier crossing hostile ground with a wounded alien in his arms. Valkyrian command feeds showed the same event from a different angle, stripped of emotion, focused only on facts. The facts refused to stay quiet. A warrior abandoned by her own code had survived because a human refused to obey it. Within Valkyrian ranks, tension grew. Some dismissed it as an anomaly. Others saw something dangerous in it. Questions. Commander Vexta Terra stood before the Valkyrian council chamber, hands clasped behind her back. The elders' holographic forms loomed around her, their expressions carved from centuries of unchallenged certainty. She should have died, one elder said. Her survival weakens the code. Or strengthens it, Vexta replied calmly. The chamber stirred. You observed the human, another elder said. What did you see? Vexta did not answer immediately. She saw it again in her mind. The steady pace. The refusal to abandon. The way the human had treated survival not as shame, but as responsibility. I saw conviction without expectation, she said at last. He did not save her for honor. He saved her because he could. That is chaos, an elder snapped. No, Vexta said softly. It is choice. Meanwhile, Thyrakai healed. Her body recovered faster than expected. Valkyrian physiology was resilient, but something else aided her recovery. The constant presence of humans who spoke to her, explained procedures, asked for consent even when she was too weak to refuse. No one treated her as a burden. When she was finally able to stand, David was there, leaning against the wall, pretending not to watch too closely. You look steadier, he said. I feel different, she replied. Physically. She shook her head. No. Here. She tapped her chest. My whole life, survival was something earned alone. Shared survival was weakness. And now. She hesitated. Now I am alive because someone refused to leave. David smiled faintly. Welcome to the club. The Valkyrian delegation arrived 2 days later. They entered the medical bay in full ceremonial armor, rigid, formal, their presence heavy with judgment. Thyrakai stood tall despite her injuries, facing them without support. You should not stand, one warrior said. I choose to, she replied. Vexta stepped forward. Thyrakai of the forward talon. You were marked fallen. I was, Thyrakai said. And yet, I stand. The code. Failed me, Thyrakai interrupted. Gasps rippled through the delegation. Not in battle. In belief. She turned, gesturing toward David. This human did not see shame. He saw a warrior worth saving. Silence fell. You survived because you were carried, an elder voice said through a holo-channel. Yes, Thyrakai answered. And because of that, I will fight again. I will teach again. I will protect others again. Tell me, where is the Dishner in that? No one answered. David felt something tighten in his chest as he watched. This was bigger than him now. Bigger than one rescue. This was a fracture forming in something ancient. Vexta inclined her head slowly. Perhaps, she said, we have mistaken endurance for honor, and death for strength. The words echoed. Across the station, across species, across long-held beliefs. And somewhere between stars, a simple human choice began to rewrite what survival meant. The story was not over. It was only beginning. The Valkyrian Council did not reach a decision that day. That alone was unprecedented. For a species whose laws were carved into history and rarely questioned, hesitation was a crack in stone. And cracks, once formed, had a way of spreading. Thyrakai was ordered to remain on the station under observation. Officially, it was for her recovery. Unofficially, it was because no one knew what to do with a warrior who had survived the unspeakable and refused to be ashamed of it. David returned to duty, but nothing felt routine anymore. Wherever he went, eyes followed. Human crews greeted him with quiet respect. Alien crews watched with curiosity, some with unease. He had not meant to become a symbol. But symbols did not ask permission. 3 days later, the Nex returned. This time, they did not strike a colony. They struck a supply convoy near the station's outer perimeter. Fast. Precise. A message. Red alert lights flooded the corridors as alarms sounded. David was already moving before the call finished echoing through the command deck. Multiple hostile signatures, Tactical Control reported. They're testing our response. David pulled on his armor and keyed his comm scramble intercept teams. I want eyes on their formation. A familiar voice cut in. Calm. Steady. Requesting clearance to deploy. David froze. Say again. Thyrakai stepped onto the deck, armored once more, though lighter now, reinforced for mobility rather than last stands. Her posture was upright. Her eyes were clear. Valkyrian warrior Thyrakai, she said. Requesting permission to fight. The room went silent. You're not cleared, a commander snapped. You're still under. I am under no Dishner, Thyrakai said firmly. And the enemy is here. David met her gaze. He saw no recklessness there. No desire to prove anything. Only resolve. She knows the next tactics better than anyone here, he said. Let her fly. A pause. Then command relented. The station's hangar doors opened, and human and Valkyrian fighters launched side by side. For the first time, they flew in mixed formations, human improvisation weaving with alien precision. The next did not expect it. Their attack pattern faltered as the combined force adapted faster than their simulations predicted. Human pilots disrupted targeting systems with erratic maneuvers. Valkyrian fighters struck with devastating accuracy. At the center of it all, Thyrakai flew. Not alone. David watched from tactical command as her craft took a hit meant for a human transport. She did not retreat. She adjusted, compensated, and held the line long enough for the convoy to escape. Damage report, David said. Minor, she replied. I am still standing. The battle ended in minutes. The Nex withdrew, leaving behind wreckage and unanswered questions. But the real impact came after. Valkyrian channels lit up with debate. Warriors replayed the footage again and again. A warrior who had been carrying others. Human networks responded differently. They told the story simply. He stayed. She lived. They fought together. The council reconvened that night. Thyrakai stood before them once more, this time in full view of the galaxy. I did not lose my honor when I was carried, she said. I gained perspective. She turned, gesturing to the gathered species watching through countless feeds. Honor that demands death over survival is not strength. It is fear wearing tradition as armor. The elders argued. Voices rose. Centuries pushed back. Then Commander Vexter stepped forward and did something no Valkyrian had done in recorded history. She removed her ceremonial blade and placed it on the floor. I stood on that battlefield, Vexter said. I watched a human carry one of ours when we would not. I believed I was preserving our code. She looked at Thyrakai. Then at the blade. I was wrong. Shock rippled through the chamber. Our ancestors forged the code to protect us, Vexter continued. Not to cage us. Survival is not shame. Abandonment is. Silence followed. Deep. Heavy. Transformative. The council voted. Not unanimously, but decisively. The code would change. Warriors could accept aid without Dishner. Survival would no longer erase legacy. Carrying a fallen comrade would be recognized as an act of shared strength. Thyrakai was reinstated. Not as an exception. As an example. Later, on the station's observation deck, David stood watching the stars. Thyrakai joined him, her steps quiet. You broke something ancient, she said. David smiled faintly. Usually I just break rules. She studied him for a long moment. My people will remember this. Not just your action, but your refusal to walk away. That's kind of our thing. Below them, human and alien ships moved together in synchronized orbits. Not allies bound by treaties, but by experience. Thyrakai extended her hand. David took it without hesitation. Across the galaxy, stories spread. Not of a battle won, but of a choice made. And somewhere Someone listening would learn that sometimes the strongest act in the universe is simply staying when everyone else leaves. The message spread faster than anyone expected. Across trade hubs, frontier outposts, and neutral worlds, the story replayed in fragments. Not polished propaganda. Not heroic speeches. Just raw footage and verified logs. A human carrying a fallen alien. A warrior who survived. A code that bent instead of breaking. And somewhere far beyond the mapped sectors, the Nex watched. They had underestimated humans before. That mistake had cost them ships, territory, and influence. But this was different. Humans were no longer just dangerous because of their weapons. They were dangerous because others were starting to follow them. Deep within a Nex command vessel, an observer cast analyst reviewed the data again. Human behavior models failed repeatedly at the same point. They did not abandon. Not their own. Not allies. Not even enemies who had earned their respect. Adjust threat classification, the analyst ordered. Humans are no longer isolated variables. They are catalysts. Plans shifted. The next move would not be a raid. It would be a lesson. On the orbital station, life settled into a tense calm. Repairs continued. Convoys resumed. Patrols doubled. But something fundamental had changed in the atmosphere. Human and Valkyrian crews trained together now. Not formally. Not officially. They learned by watching each other. David found himself running joint simulations late into the cycle, trading tactics, adapting strategies on the fly. Valkyrian warriors questioned assumptions humans had never thought to challenge. Humans improvised solutions Valkyrians would once have dismissed as reckless. Together, they became unpredictable. Thyrakai recovered fully, but she did not return to her old role. Instead, she requested reassignment as a liaison. A bridge. Someone who understood both the weight of tradition and the cost of blind loyalty to it. David supported the request without hesitation. She's seen what happens when cultures stop listening, he told command. That makes her valuable. The first joint mission came sooner than expected. A distress signal. Faint. Fragmented. From a neutral research station near disputed space. Multiple species present. Nex signatures detected. Command debated for minutes. David did not. We go, he said. Now. The strike team deployed within the hour. Mixed units. Shared command. No clear hierarchy. Just trust earned under fire. As they approached the station, the damage became clear. Hull breaches. Power fluctuations. Life signs scattered and weak. The Nex were still inside. This time, David did not carry Thyrakai. This time, they moved side by side. The breach was narrow, forcing close-quarters combat. Nex drones poured through the corridors, fast and ruthless. Valkyrian blades met human fire in perfect rhythm. Where one faltered, the other covered. They adapted in real time. When a human soldier went down, Thyrakai dragged him to safety without hesitation. No pause. No shame. No second thought. David saw it. So did everyone else. They pushed deeper, reclaimed control nodes, rerouted life support. The Nex withdrew again, but not before leaving behind something new. A message burned into the station's internal displays. Not a threat. A warning. You change what should end. David stared at the words long after the lights dimmed. They're afraid, Thyrakai said quietly. Of us. Of what we make possible. Back on the station, the aftermath was different this time. No hesitation. No debate. The rescued survivors spoke openly. Of humans who stayed. Of aliens who fought beside them. Of lives saved not because of orders, but because someone chose to care. More species took notice. Requests came in. Not for weapons. Not for treaties. For training. For cooperation. For understanding how humans did what they did. David stood at the center of it all, uncomfortable with the attention, aware of the responsibility. One choice had led here. One refusal to walk away. Thyrakai joined him on the observation deck again, watching new ships arrive. "The galaxy is changing," she said. David nodded. "It always was. We just stopped pretending it wasn't." She looked at him. "If the next strike again, it will be worse." "Probably. And you will still stay." David smiled faintly. "That's the plan." Somewhere in the darkness between stars, fleets began to move. The story was growing now. Spreading. Evolving. And it all began the same way it always did. With one human staying when everyone else walked away. The next did not wait long. They never did when fear entered their calculations. 3 cycles after the joint rescue, long-range sensors detected mass movement beyond the fringe. Not a raid. Not a probe. A coordinated advance across multiple vectors, aimed not at a single world, but at the idea spreading behind it. Human command rooms filled with quiet urgency. Valkyrian war halls echoed with disciplined motion. Other species watched, uncertain, afraid to choose sides yet unable to look away. David stood before the tactical display, arms folded, eyes steady. The projected lines showed next fleets fanning outward, cutting supply routes, isolating stations. "They're not trying to conquer," Lieutenant Kim said softly. "They're trying to break cooperation before it takes root." Thyrakai nodded. "They fear unity more than weapons." A message arrived moments later. Open channel. Unencrypted. The next speaker appeared, tall, angular, eyes like polished stone. "You disrupt natural order," the voice said. "Species endure alone. Those who fall are meant to fall. You interfere." David stepped forward. "We help. That's the difference." "You weaken survival," the next replied. "We will correct this." The channel closed. Silence followed. Then David spoke, not loudly, not dramatically. "They think we'll fracture under pressure. That we'll retreat into ourselves." He looked around the room. Humans. Valkyrians. Others who had chosen to stay. Let's disappoint them. The plan that followed was not elegant. It was not perfect. It was human. Instead of forming a single defensive line, they broke into small, flexible groups. Mixed teams. Shared command. Each unit empowered to act, adapt, and support nearby allies without waiting for orders. The Nex advanced into uncertainty. Everywhere they struck, they met resistance that refused to behave as expected. When Nex ships crippled a Valkyrian cruiser, human vessels shielded it. When human fighters ran low on power, alien craft rotated in to cover them. No one was left behind. Reports flooded in. "They stayed with us. They came back. They carried our wounded." Thyrakai led one such unit deep into contested space. During a brutal engagement, her ship took a direct hit, systems failing, hull tearing open. Alarms screamed. "Evacuate," her crew urged. She shook her head. "Not yet." She maneuvered her failing craft into the path of a Nex destroyer, drawing fire long enough for 2 allied ships to escape. The cost was high. Her engines died completely. Drifting. Vulnerable. David's unit was the closest. "Turn around," command warned him. "You'll be exposed." David didn't answer. He was already moving. He reached Thyrakai's ship under fire, magnetic clamps locking with a jolt that nearly shattered his hull. Boarding alarms blared as atmosphere vented. Inside, smoke and sparks filled the corridor. Thyrakai was wounded again, pinned by debris, blood dark against her armor. "You should not have come," she said weakly. David cut through the wreckage, hauling it aside. "I know. I hear that a lot." He lifted her without hesitation. Across open channels, dozens of crews watched the feed. Humans. Valkyrians. Others still deciding who they were. A human carrying an alien again. But this time, something changed. Other ships moved in. Not ordered. Not assigned. They chose to. A shield formed. Then another. Fire concentrated outward as the rescue unfolded. The Nex, faced with a response they could not predict or isolate, began to pull back. Not in defeat. In doubt. The battle ended without celebration. Too many wounded. Too many close calls. But something irreversible had happened. Later, in the quiet of the medical bay, Thyrakai opened her eyes to see David sitting nearby, helmet off, exhausted. "You stayed," she said. "Yes." Again. David smiled tiredly. "Still our thing." She studied him, then the room beyond, humans and aliens working together without pause, without ceremony. "My people believed survival alone was strength," she said. "You showed us something stronger." "What's that?" "Survival shared." Outside, the galaxy shifted. Messages poured in from species that had watched from the edges. They did not ask who was in charge. They asked how to stand together. The Nex withdrew to regroup, their calculations shaken, their certainty fractured. They had learned something dangerous. You could not defeat a force that refused to abandon its own. And somewhere among the stars, the next choice waited to be made. Because as long as someone was willing to stay, the story would never truly end.